Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order. So, do I need to read this? Okay. So, public notice of this meeting was properly posted at the office of the South Carolina Board of Genetic Counselors, Synergy Business Park, Kings Street Building, 110 Centerview Drive in Columbia, South Carolina, on the board's website, and provided to any requesting persons, organizations, or news media in compliance with SC Code Section 34-80 of the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. Members of the public who wish to view the meeting may do so by live stream at https://gen/videos/ASPX. So the second item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any questions or changes that need to be brought up? Any myself. So I'll call for a vote to approve the agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I need a motion first. I second. All right, so now we'll vote to approve the agenda. Everyone say aye. Any opposed can say nay. Okay, so the agenda is approved. Number 3 is approval or disapproval of the absent members, and I don't know that we have any absent members. All are present today. Do I need to do anything else on that one? Okay. So number 4 is the approval of the minutes from the meeting on January 21st, 2025. So I'm going to give us a moment to review those on your computer.
Just for the members' knowledge, I did note one typo that I've already shared with Pam so that she can correct that later. So if, once you've reviewed, if there's a motion to approve, if we could do it as a motion to approve with correction of the one typo.
Everyone had time? You need a couple of minutes, Kim? Okay. Are there, other than what Brandy had mentioned, is there any other changes or concerns about the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve
With the changes
edit.
that Brandy, yeah, good call. The motion's made by Sarah. Is there a second? We'll vote to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed can say nay. Okay, we will approve the minutes. So the 5th item on the agenda are the chairperson remarks from myself. And I'm going to read the purpose of the board. And the purpose of the Board of Genetic Counselors is to protect the public through the regulation of professionals who educate and communicate with the public regarding the human problems associated with the occurrence or the risk of occurrence of a genetic disorder in a family, including the provision of services to help an individual or family. The board also investigates complaints and conducts application and disciplinary hearings in accordance with state statutes and regulations. The other part of the remarks is to introduce our new board member, Dr. Akil Sirka, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Tell us a little about yourself.
I'm Dr. Akil Sirka. I'm a pediatrician. Have been practicing in Spartanburg, South Carolina, for almost 17 years. I am honored to have been appointed to serve on this board. I think, obviously, as a pediatrician, genetics is a big part of what I do. I'm very familiar with the profession and what all of you do, and I'm thankful for it. I also have a personal stake. My wife carries a cancer gene, associated with breast cancer, so I married her almost 2 years ago, and I walk with her on that journey. And so, obviously, genetic counseling is a big part of her care, and so many ways, I think this is an important thing that y'all are doing, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Approve my chairperson remarks? Okay, cool. So we will move on to item number 6, which are the administrative reports. And so this will be led by Pam Duncan.
Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Good to see everybody in person today. I think our last meeting we had to do virtual because of snow in Charleston, and we had a little bit here in the Midlands too. So it's good to see everybody in person, and I'm happy to say now we are a full board. All board member seats are now filled. So I too concur with the board chair and welcome you, sir, to the board. And if you have my contact information, you have Sean. If you ever need anything, please reach out to either one of us.
Thank you.
The first item that I'm going to go over is the finance report. Our finance department was able to put one together for the board to see. And basically what it does is just show the revenue that the board has taken in as far as the expenses that the board has paid. Now, this is through March 31st of this year. So they're going to be like a month behind because they have to have a month to consolidate, consolidate things and to end the books for that month. But as of March 31st, the board has a cash balance of $133,116.20. So far in 2025, the board has taken in $145,800 in revenue. And then you'll see that there's two types of expenses, direct, and then there's shared services expenses. Now and there's little explanations below, but if, and I'll go over them, but please let me know if you have any questions. And we can always bring someone in from the finance department that could probably do a little better job explaining the breakdown for the board members. But the direct expenses would be the expenses that board staff incurs, such as personal services. That would be that could be wages, insurance, computers, that type of thing. Something that has to do with board staff. The contractual services, that could include the rent for the building. Each board has to pay a certain amount to contribute towards the rent for the building. So this board would not pay, say, what the medical board might pay for rent or what the nursing board might pay for rent. Is based upon a percentage of that board's revenue. Supplies, if office supplies, pens, paper, paper clips, those type of things. And then travel would include your travel here to the board meetings, or we're going to talk later on about maybe sending a couple of board members to the national conference that's later on this year. So that would fall under the travel expenses. So far, the board has a total expenditure of $1,482.18. That's the direct expenditures. Now, if you look over to the right-hand side, that's the shared services summary. And I know that print down at the bottom is really kind of fine, but I'll read it. You see administrative transfers, OIE legal transfers, and poll administration transfers. The administration transfers include administrative services, director's office, advice council, and communications. Percentage of the shared based on board's previous fiscal year, which, this board didn't have anything for the previous year, as compared to all boards' total previous fiscal year expenditures. So these services would be for areas of the agency that don't bring in revenue, such as the director's office, advice council. And then you'll see another one that says OIE legal transfers. And that would help pay for the Office of Investigations, the Office of Disciplinary Counsel. So there's a certain percentage that the board is being charged for those services. And then the last one is the poll administration transfers, which would be like for Teresa Rich, or for my program director, for the trying to think of Robbie's official title, but it would help to cover those salaries that, once again, they don't generate revenue, and once again, that's a percentage that's based upon the board's total income. Now, I did make a question myself, and I do want to check on this. I'd like to know what the percentage they're using to pull for the OIE legal transfers. Knock on wood, right now the board hasn't had any complaints or any investigations or whatnot. So I thought that was a little high. So I do plan on reaching out to see if I can find out a little bit more about that percentage, and I'd be glad to share that with the board at the next board meeting. Or I can ask somebody with finance, would they be willing to come and speak to the board, and they can do a much better job of explaining this breakdown than what I've done. But if you do have any questions, I'd be glad to see if I can answer them. If not, get answers for you.
Thank you for explaining all that. I think you did a great job. I don't know if this isn't really directly related to this, but one of the concerns for our profession is the cost of the initial license and how this would play into our ability to reduce the fee. Is that related, and am I making sense?
Yeah, it is related, and it's, the first year of a board is always difficult because you never know exactly how much expenses are going to be. But I know part of the process that finance goes through is that they do periodically review these. I want to say it's on a cycle of every 3 years, but maybe it's every 2 now. So once they do that review, if they see that they're bringing in a lot more funds than are really needed, they'll come to the board and kind of break that down, explain that to you, make a recommendation of what they think it probably should move to, and then they'll take that down to the General Assembly. So every year we have 1 or 2 proposed regulations that are going through to the General Assembly to adjust the license fees up and down as needed based on those 2-year reviews that we do.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions related to Pam's finance report?
Okay, thank you. The next is a legislative update that I kind of wanted to give the board and was asked to give the board, like on the regulations. Let me get my little note here. So far, the regulations have been approved by the House Subcommittee, the House Full Committee, and the Senate Subcommittee. And Amy has done a fabulous job in representing the board, attending those meetings. Now, the regulations will be heard this week, this Thursday, as a matter of fact, May 1st, by the Senate Full Committee. And Brandy, correct me if I say something that's wrong. When the full committee approves the regulations, they'll go before the General Assembly. Is that right?
Yes, so the Senate, if the Senate full committee recommends the regs for passage, what they will do is then introduce a bill to recommend approval of the regulations. Normally what they do is they let that sit out there for about 2 weeks so that other members are aware of it in case they have a major concern with something. Obviously, we don't have 2 weeks left in the session anymore, so they'd probably just put it out there and leave it out there. And I don't know exactly what the timing was on these regs, so I don't know if they'll time out before the session ends this year or not. That's something I can check on. But there's also legislation out there to reduce the amount of time. So normally it has to wait 120 days of a General Assembly session. They've had a bill out there to reduce the time to 100, and now they've changed it to 110. And so that's kind of in limbo. We're not sure where the number is going to land yet. But we'll know by the next meeting if they made it through this session or if it'll be early January next year before they make it through. So, and I know some of the questions that Ms. Dobson had to answer, there seemed to be some concerns at one of the subcommittees that perhaps genetic counseling might be used primarily to coach or encourage women who are pregnant with babies who have genetic abnormalities to terminate their pregnancies. And Ms. Dobson, I think, did an excellent job of explaining that that is not actually a focus, that what it is to educate the parents about what's going on with their child so that they can properly prepare, perhaps coordinate with other medical providers to maybe have medical interventions done, sometimes even before the baby's born, to try to give that baby a better outcome medically in life and to just prepare for what's coming. So that may continue to be perhaps a misconception that is dealt with, both as we go through this regulatory procedure and just in general. So
That's not something that we are unfamiliar with. So, my thesis was actually about that for graduate school. But I do have a question. So if the regulations don't get through before the end of this session, what does that mean as far as how the board operates without like an approved regulations?
it just means that we continue to just operate under only the statutes
Okay.
for right now. So we can continue to operate. I think the timing was done in a way that they'll make it through this year.
Okay.
I just need to double check that. And I can double check that with Pam after this meeting, and we can send an email out confirming one way or the other, just to let y'all know.
One of the major concerns with the statutes versus the regulation is the handling of temporary licenses and when those are, I guess, revoked or ended based on attempts at the board. That was important for the board with the regulation wording versus the statute. So my main concern about those not passing this session. Do you have more on the legislative stuff, Pam?
I just wanted to go over briefly I had mentioned it to Allison and Amy, but there is a couple of other bills in reference to the Small Business Regulatory Freedom Act. It doesn't necessarily just pertain to this board. It's all not, it's all the boards here, and it could be other boards as well with other state agencies. It, in a nutshell, what it would do is create a small business regulatory review committee that would conduct initial reviews of the regulations. Like, it would kind of change up our process on how, like, if the board, once regulations are passed and then some changes needed to be made. Right now, it's the same process as what the board is going through now with the new regulations. If this particular bill went through, it would change up some. This committee would be, instead of taking it to the House and the Senate committees, the Small Business Committee would look at those changes first. And then they would make recommendations to the General Assembly. But I checked it. There's two versions of the bill, but they're identical. They both say the same thing. But the House bill it's been passed by the House, but it hasn't been. It's still on the Senate side. And like Brandy said, there's 4 or 5 days left in the session this year. So, and I didn't see where it's listed to be heard any time before the end of the session. So, but you never know. You never know. Sometimes they pull the representatives back after session has ended and do special called meetings. But that's just something that the entire agency is looking at. And like I said, it affects all the boards. So just wanted to, that was something Allison had asked specifically about. So just kind of want to give the other board members a heads up on in case you hear about it, in case you hear something like, oh, what's, or is there going to be a reorganization at LOR? And no, that's not the intent of this bill. It would just change up the way regulations are updated and reviewed. But once again, if something happens before and let's say if it doesn't get passed, then it would have to come up again at the next session. So they work a little bit differently than regulations do. Regulations can, like Brandy was saying, could time out. The bills like this, they can't time out. If they don't get approved within the session, then they carry over to the next session.
You any questions about that from my other board members? Okay.
Sorry about that. I can get a little wordy sometimes.
You did great. Thank you.
The next two items are a review list of the new licensees issued since January 15th. And then we also have given the board a grand total, a number of licensees. So as of April 22nd, we had 256 licensed genetic counselors. And from January to April 22nd, we licensed 105 new genetic counselors during that time. All right, and that's all I had, Madam Chair, unless there's some questions.
I don't have any. Do you guys have any? Approve the remarks. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is number 7, which is new business. And the first item is upcoming travel meetings to discuss and vote on those. And one of the ones that I had mentioned was the National Society of Genetic Counselors Annual Education Conference, which occurs November 7th through the 10th this year in Seattle, Washington. I am not planning on going to that myself, but I didn't know if there are other board members that were planning to or wanted to.
I'll be going, but because of my job.
Does your job already help provide travel expenses for that?
What my plan is for meetings.
You don't know what you're doing in November.
At this point, I am considering.
What about you, Kim?
I'm hoping to find a way to be there, but I need to firm up childcare before I commit 100%.
Okay. Do we have to make this decision today?
You don't have to, but I would recommend going ahead and voting on approvals so that if things work out okay in people's schedules, it's not something where we have to have a special called meeting to approve people. We do normally recommend that you not send what would be considered a quorum of
right.
the committee, because we don't want anybody to say there was an accidental meeting. So for the board, I would recommend only 2 spots at maximum. Was there a request for any staff to go?
I was going to ask if the board could maybe approve
that's
one
cool.
staff member to
So, yeah.
attend as well.
So like if, with Sarah already going through her company, then we can only send one other board member without it being a quorum.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I would recommend. So perhaps we could do a motion to approve 1 board member, 1 staff member.
Ask a question. If we vote to send another board member, does that mean that others of us cannot go through our employer or our other roles due to risking a quorum being present?
Not necessarily, but if that were to happen, I would strongly encourage you to not ever have the 3 of you talking at the same time about anything.
That would be
Does that
easy.
make
Thank
sense?
you. Yes.
Yeah.
The size of that meeting. It's impressive to get all of us in the same place.
There are a lot of choices of genetic counselor meetings. So part of why I said I wasn't sure, because I wasn't sure what the rest of you all were doing. So I'm happy to not go to NS, pick a different meeting. I don't typically attend that meeting.
I'm recertifying this year, so I don't need any other education, and I can't go anyway. So if we want to approve 1 board member, do we have to say who it is, or are we just saying, we approve somebody?
Just
Okay.
that you're approving funding for one board member and however many staff.
I would like to ask maybe if we could send 2 staff members. That way, if somebody with OIE wanted to go as well, then that would, like Brandy said, we don't have to name specific people, but that would allow us to send 2 staff members.
Right, and just because the board might approve, say, 1 board member and 2 staff, does not necessarily mean that we absolutely have to send 1 board member and 1 staff person. We can always back off and say, oh, we're just going to send 1 staff member or whatever.
I think that sounds reasonable, but from a standpoint of being brand new and learning, can I ask, do the staff members attend the educational sessions or the exhibit halls or like take notes on the process? What purpose is served?
Well, it's to help us to become better acquainted with genetic counselors. And then it also helps to put like a name with a face, I would assume. And I know that's not a good word, but I would think maybe other board executives, other state board executives attend this meeting as well. So it's good in that aspect too, as far as communication and like I said, put a name with a face. It would, I think with the investigators, once again, it's going to help them with, knock on wood, we haven't received any investigations yet, but something, if we do get one, that would help them. It helps them have a better feel for what genetic counselors do, because we have to be very careful with complaints. So it's not like we would be able to reach out to the board members and say, hey, we got this complaint, we got a question, because then that would taint the investigation. But once again, it's up to the board, it's up to the board.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
So will someone make a motion to approve one board member and 2 staff persons for this NSGC conference this year?
Motion to approve 1 board member and 2 staff members to attend NSGC 2025.
Second?
Second.
All in favor can say aye. Aye. Any opposed can say nay. All right, so that was approved. Were there any other meetings, and this would kind of be changing the agenda, but any other meetings that we know of today? Okay.
Is anybody planning to go to Surge? That's a regional genetics meeting in July.
Where is Surge this
It's in
year?
Asheville. That's
close-
again dependent on another meeting that's like the same week and childcare, but it's on my radar. I don't feel strongly that the board needs to have a presence, but it's one of the more prominent Southeastern meetings.
If we don't approve anything else at this meeting, we've kind of missed opportunity to do that.
Unless we were to do a special called meeting for the sole purpose of doing that. Now, if we did a special called meeting for the sole purpose of that, we would probably do it as an online meeting.
Or what is Surge?
Southeastern Regional Genetics Group. So it's South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, where else? Tennessee. Yeah, it tends to alternate annually between Asheville and Charleston, I believe, and gathering of clinical genetics professionals, geneticists, genetic counselors, genetics adjacent colleagues.
We can add that to our radar if that's an annual meeting. So like when we prepare for the meetings next year, we can already have that on the radar and include it on whatever agenda we need to include it so we get their approval in time.
Sounds good.
Another annual meeting would be the American College of Medical Genetics, ACMG. Their genetics-focused annual conference.
I think it already passed for this year,
Yeah,
but
it
for
did.
next year, yeah.
It's like usually in March. And there's ASHAG, ASHG. I've never been to ASHAG myself, but it's a genetics annual conference, ASHG. Are there any other big annual ones y'all can think of?
Certainly, if y'all get emails about these throughout the year and it triggers your memory, oh, this is one.
Let Pam know.
Yeah, just let Pam know, and they'll kind of start mentally tracking that to make sure that we get approvals as appropriate.
The other thing that we could put on the agenda for the next meeting is consideration of presence at the South Carolina Genetic Counseling Society meeting. It's going to
It's
be
annual,
in
yeah.
Charleston in October, I believe, this year.
October 3rd or 10th.
Yeah.
We're waiting on MUSC to make.
Do you think that would be appropriate for this? I mean, it makes sense since it's the South Carolina
That's
gathering.
It was when, in October?
We haven't decided the final date. It's either going to be October 3rd or October 10th at MUSC in Charleston.
But I guess we don't want to exclude board members from an important event like that. We'll just have to be intentional about not spending
Talking.
face time with each other.
Because that's a lot smaller meeting, obviously.
Yeah, and we can be searching the web, looking the website, their website to see, once they post the date and all that. And
That'll be another, hopefully annual. This is the second annual conference, so.
But usually the local associated meetings are good ones for there to be board presence at.
I had a question about these, the meetings. Obviously, genetic counseling is a really small profession. And so, I mean, it's often, I would imagine, that some of you would find yourself in the same place at the same time. So just as long as board business is not discussed, I mean, are they allowed to have personal gatherings? I just wanted to clarify what exactly is important to avoid.
Yes, as long as board and LLR stuff basically is not discussed. So just avoid talking about everything we do here. If there's ever,
Walk the other way, it's not like, yeah.
right. Although if you want to use it as an excuse, but yeah, no, you're correct. The prohibition is about specifically discussing board business. So LLR generally has recommended for conferences that just if we're funding, that we try to keep that number below the quorum number, just so there can't even be an allegation that a meeting took place. That's all.
Is there a copy of that Freedom Act thing that we got at our first meeting that we could share with Dr. Circa because he wasn't here at our first meeting? That was helpful for me. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good point that you brought up, sir, because, once people realize that you're on the board, they may reach out to you and say, hey, I got a question about my application, and at that point, you would refer those calls to me or Sean, because once again, you never know that person could have something come up and they have a discipline and they have to come before the board for a hearing. If they had interaction, and Brandy's going to go over that later about the recusals, then that person would have to recuse themselves from the hearing. So if you get any outside contact, you can refer those to me or Sean.
All right. So we'll move on to item B of the new business, which is discussion and vote of the IRC members. Pam, are you going to lead that discussion?
I can. Yes, ma'am. Brandy, is it okay for me to mention the names in open?
Yes.
Okay. Our OIE department, our Office of Investigations, and I'll briefly go over it again with everyone, but like when a complaint is filed, an investigation is begun on that complaint. And then once the investigation is complete, then that investigation goes to the IRC committee. And the IRC will review the findings of the complaint. Usually that's myself, the lead investigator, Ratisha. Then the ODC, that would be Miss Erica. She's the ODC attorney. And then whoever the board elects as one of the licensees, because it's just really helpful to have someone who is a license in that profession on it. It just makes sense to have them on that committee as well. So we've actually got 3 names that have reached out and said they're willing to work on, be part of the committee. It meets quarterly. And like I said, right now, there's been no complaints, but OIE just wanted to be proactive instead of reactive and go ahead and have these members in place so in case that need does arise. But it's generally a quarterly meeting, about a month or so before the board meeting. Will it be virtual, Ratisha?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Sure. All right, is this better? You're welcome. So it really just depends on where they're located and if they want to come to Columbia, but we're able to do teleconferences or WebEx.
And do they complaints?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Do they meet if there are no complaints?
No, ma'am, they do not.
And give you a little bit more background, the purpose of the IRC is to go over everything with the investigator, with the disciplinary counsel attorney, to go over everything that's in the complaint and to make a recommendation to the board about disposition of that complaint. So a recommendation might be, for example, that, yeah, we think something bad happened here, so we're going to recommend that it go forward as a formal complaint. Or it might be, we don't really think there's a violation of the Practice Act, and so we're recommending dismissal. Or maybe they were kind of edging up on the Practice Act but didn't really violate it, so we're just recommending a letter of caution be sent to the licensee. Those reports from the IRC always come before this board for consideration, and y'all can approve them or disapprove them or approve them with modifications. So I've had boards before look at something that was down for like a letter of caution, and based on kind of the limited information they get, say, no, we don't think a letter of caution is appropriate here. We are approving everything on the IRC report except for that one case. We want that one case to be a formal complaint. Or we don't think a letter of caution is appropriate here. We want that case to be dismissed. So ultimately the decision is still y'all's. But this is a way to have a little bit of input before a full case is brought before the board and litigated for discipline. And frankly, to keep cases that don't necessarily need a full hearing to deal with those earlier in the process so that it doesn't drag on for the licensee.
How long will they serve on the IRC once we approve them or appoint them?
It really depends on them. So we have some people that remain for however long, and then some just feel like it's too much of a commitment. And then at that point, they will come and say, or at least tell us that they do not want to serve anymore. And we will usually replace, if we only have 3, we probably would need to replace that third one. We typically like to keep 3, especially looking at the volume and making sure that we stay somewhat unbiased, or at least somebody, 2 agrees and 1 disagrees, so it makes it a little more even.
It's not like board positions that roll off. It's like as long as they're willing to serve kind of a thing.
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
What you see too is sometimes when somebody, for whatever reason, does not want to serve on the actual board anymore, a lot of times you'll see those former board members volunteer to be IRC members, because those meetings can, particularly for certain occupations, be less onerous than the board meeting, because you can normally do them by WebEx or Zoom. Now we have some boards though where they have a lot of cases, and so they always do their IRC in person, because it's easier when you have a lot of cases. So.
Are there any questions from the board members about the 3 candidates that we have? Y'all see them in the notes? Okay. So we would need a motion to approve these 3 candidates to serve on the IRC.
Do we need to say their names in the motion?
I would go ahead and say their names, yes. Especially if we're going to do a joint motion to approve all 3 at once.
Motion to approve Bridget Afmuth, Elizabeth Libby Melfus, and Jessica Mage Lopez to IRC board members.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor can say aye. Aye. And any opposed can say nay. So we'll approve these 3 IRC members. Thanks. So the next item on the agenda is the recusals, led by Brandy.
Right. So this is just a little bit of training. And I know y'all haven't been with me long, but periodically stuff comes up where it just sort of triggers for us, okay, well, maybe we just need to do a quick little 5-minute thing on this or that or whatever. And one of the things that happened recently is we actually had the State Ethics Commission come in for some stuff with another board to observe and give them some feedback. And one of the pieces that they gave us was some information on recusals, specifically that there is a statute that says if somebody has to recuse themselves from a case, the actual signed recusal form that is done by that board member is supposed to be attached to the meeting minutes. So we've always given it to the court reporter as an exhibit, but we did not realize previously that we should be attaching it to the meeting minutes. And so that, for me, triggered the idea of, not so much with this board because y'all haven't had a lot of cases or disciplinary things come up yet, but for some of my other boards, that a little bit of recusal refresher training in general would just be good. So that's all we're doing today. It's very short, 5 slides. I think we can probably get it done in about 5 minutes. So there are 3 basic situations in which you might need to recuse yourself from a case. Most of them, I think, are pretty intuitive. The first is if for some reason as a board member you are involved in a case, whether that means you're the actual licensee at issue, you're a supervisor of that licensee, you were the complainant for some reason, you're a witness. If you are already involved in that case, you should not sit on that case. Also, if there's ever a proceeding where you actually have, or you might appear to have, a bias or a taint in the case, then you probably should not sit on it. So, for example, if a case came up with somebody who works in the same facility as you, even if you have no personal knowledge or connection to the case, you might still want to recuse yourself just so there is not an appearance of bias. The one that is more kind of firmly described in law is one in which you or your family member or somebody with whom you are associated with or a business with whom you are associated with has an economic interest in the decision you're making. Those are not likely to come before this board, but it is important to keep that in mind. When we're talking about an economic interest, we are not talking about just a general type question. So for example, we were talking about fees, licensure fees earlier. Those obviously would impact all licensees. That's a more general question. We're talking about a distinct financial interest, and it has to be one that is $50 or more. So if we're talking about maybe you're going to get a $10 plaque, you don't need to worry about that so much unless you just want, for there not to even be an appearance of impropriety. So, but if it's a general question that kind of affects everybody who is in the genetic counseling profession, you can continue to sit on that, even if there is that financial interest. So, functionally, how do we do this properly? The first thing you will do is, while we are on the record with the court reporter, you will literally tell the chair that you need to recuse yourself from a case, and you're going to give a general description of why you're recusing yourself. So you might say, for example, I know this licensee, or I mentored this licensee when they were in their graduate program. Also, if you have not done so prior to the meeting, we actually have a recusal form that you need to fill out. We will, of course, give a copy of that recusal form to the court reporter to include as an exhibit for whatever that hearing or matter is, and we will attach that recusal form to your meeting minutes. So, for example, if the reason you're recusing yourself is because whoever we're dealing with is your neighbor, you might say, Madam Chair, I need to recuse myself from this case because this licensee is my neighbor, right? You would not want to say, Madam Chair, I need to recuse myself from this case because the licensee is my neighbor at 123 Main Street, unless, of course, you want everybody to know where you live. And similarly, you would not fill the form out, with that super personal information. After you do that, you will then leave the room. You will literally physically leave the room. When we finish with whatever the matter is that you've recused yourself from, one of us will come out and let you know that we've finished and invite you to come back in. Functional tips for making this work better. Just review the meeting materials before the meeting if you can. That 99% of the time will help you identify, oh, this is something I need to recuse myself from. if we're before a meeting and you've identified that you need to recuse yourself, let Ms. Duncan know, Pam Duncan, or let me know, or you can let Sean know. And we'll make sure to either have the recusal form already ready for you, or we'll get it filled out before you even get here. If you're ever unsure if you need to recuse yourself, please just reach out to me, or if you can't reach me, you can speak to any attorney in the Office of Advice Counsel, and they can help you with that. It's rare that I'm not here, but on the off chance you can't track me down, you can talk to any attorney in the Office of Advice Counsel. Also, on the rare occurrence that we might be in the very middle of a case and something comes up and you realize, I'm a little too close to this case, I need to recuse, that's okay. We don't always know everything that's going on in a case until it's presented. As soon as you identify it, find as quickly as you can an appropriate place to sort of interrupt the proceedings and say, Madam Chair, I've just noticed for this reason that I need to recuse myself from the case. Go ahead and leave, and we'll get the recusal form filled out after the fact. Okay? Are there any questions about recusal?
What if myself as the chair needs to recuse? Like, do I just tell the board
Everybody.
members? Okay.
Yeah, you just tell everybody, and the vice chair would essentially step into your role as the chair for the remainder of that hearing. And that does happen sometimes.
So will the name of the person involved in the case be listed on the agenda, or will it just be stored away in these like other files that we have access to?
If it's an application hearing, it'll definitely be on the agenda. If it's a disciplinary hearing, it's usually just in the materials, because we never know for certain until after you've heard the case whether you're going to determine that discipline is appropriate or not in that case. So, but it would be available, in the board folder for materials that y'all can review ahead of time. Are there any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So the next item is just number 8, which is the reminder of the other meetings in 2025. And so our next meeting will be July 29th, 2025 on Tuesday. I'm assuming same time as works for people. And then the last meeting, hopefully, of 2025 will be October 28th, also Tuesday, same time. Concerns or comments about those meetings? Okay. So number 9, are there any other future meeting topics that we need to bring up or discuss?
We just need to keep on our radar the limited license process and making sure that's going smoothly as we have people applying for that for the first time in the very near future.
Well, I've had questions from people.
This is a limited license application live.
No, ma'am, not yet. But the board has already reviewed it. You guys reviewed it at the very first meeting and approved it. So we're just kind of sitting on go right now.
And are we waiting for the regulations to be voted in? So it could be soon,
Yes,
or,
ma'am. Mhm.
or it could be, as Brandy said earlier, January of 2026?
Yeah, that's that date I need to check on to see if we're going to time out or not. I just can't remember.
So people who've already committed to jobs in South Carolina, like beginning June, for example, who meet all of the criteria we outlined for a limited license, they can't apply and then would not be able to practice until potentially January.
So I think let us verify the date. Let me and Brandy verify that date.
If you give me just a second, I'm trying to actually look it up now.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, we have graduating students who are very eager to submit their applications, and I didn't realize that that portion wasn't live on the website.
Pam, do you happen to remember the document number? for the regs. Oh, never mind, I found it. 5311. Yeah, it does look like right now they have them set for not timing out till January 18th of 2026. But if that bill I was talking about that reduces the time from 120 days, where they were talking about moving it to 100 and then to 110, if that passes, then that should change it and move it up essentially to the end of session this year. So we're just going to have to keep our eye on that bill and see what happens with that.
What does end of session this year mean in terms of dates?
It's a week from Thursday.
Okay. Anything we can do to that end is really imperative because we have students, new graduates who are committed to South Carolina employers who are banking on them being able to see their patients in practice.
Okay. We can talk to Holly Beeson, our general counsel as well, to see if it would be possible to request that they actually push through approval this year if the 110-day thing doesn't go through itself. We can't guarantee that the General Assembly would do that, obviously, but we could talk to her to see if that's a possibility to request that they go ahead and approve them.
Can you do?
Yeah, we can. Mhm.
It's like you can. Will you? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Everything you can do to that end would be appreciated. Otherwise, we may have to convene another meeting before July because this would pose a major issue statewide.
I have a question in terms of, I mean, we're operating the full licenses. I guess I'm confused why we're not able to do the temporary licenses because they're all in the same regulations.
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Amy, I agree. I didn't realize that there was any holdup on the limited licenses. I've been directing people to the same web portal where the information block on what you need to apply for a limited license is there. Since I already have the full license, I can't go past a certain point of pretending I'm a student and wanting one, but I thought it was going to work for them.
It's because in the statutes only refer to the genetic counselor's permanent license.
We
There's
have language in our statutes about temporary licenses. I know it's in there. I don't remember exactly what it says, but there are terms related to a temporary or limited license in the actual statutes of the bill.
Limited.
Might be a limited license.
Says the board may issue a limited license to a limited licensee applicant. Requirements except the certification requirement and its status. I mean, it's in 408440C.
What you're talking about?
The main differences we fleshed out in our regs was
What the requirements were? for getting it, or?
Not for giving it, but for when they lose it. So I think the statutes stay after failing the board on first attempt, and we changed the language to be a little bit more like on their second attempt because of the difficulties it would provide for employers, because the pass rate has not been good in recent years. So I don't know what's going on there. Kim probably knows more, but
And issuing would be the most important thing initially,
so that they
because
can
no
actually
one's going to
practice and
take
have a
the
job.
boards until August,
At the earliest.
but people are expected to be practicing in June.
So would it be possible for us to perhaps move into an executive session for a moment so I can give y'all some legal advice? And if we could keep Pam and Sean in here for that one.
I approve that. Do we need to officially motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I make a motion as a chair?
I
All right,
prefer that you
someone-
don't.
Will someone please make a
You
motion?
can.
Session.
I second. Amy?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any So coming out of executive session, we have decided to make live or go active with the limited license application process as soon as feasibly possible through LLR. Were there any other future meeting topics? That's what we were on. So number 10 would be public comments. Are there any public comments? Does not appear to be any public comments. So at this point, we would need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed can say nay. All right, we will adjourn. Thanks, everybody.